Oscar Piastri doesn't describe the 2026 regulations as a challenge. He calls them an opportunity, and that isn't accidental. "I think the way we race each other is going to be quite different," he said, while acknowledging just how unpredictable next season will be. But for Piastri, that uncertainty is precisely the point. It dismantles the old system that previously worked against him. In 2025, Piastri wasn't beaten on pace. He was beaten by structure. He led the championship for long stretches, only for team decisions at Monza and Qatar to swing momentum back towards Lando Norris at the most critical moments. McLaren framed it as fairness, but the effect was clear. Piastri's title bid collapsed not because of performance, but because of internal architecture. That kind of system only works when the car is stable, and hierarchy can be managed without major risk. The 2026 reset wipes out those conditions. With performance no longer predictable, every point becomes too valuable to sacrifice for internal balance. In that environment, McLaren won't be able to restrain the faster driver to preserve harmony. That's why Piastri sees this season as a reset that favours him. Not because he expects better treatment, but because the old structures that limited his room to operate no longer fit the new era. If he's quick, he has to be unleashed, and that fundamentally reshapes his battle with Norris. Before we go deeper into how that battle could unfold, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the full breakdown as this season develops, because what happens inside McLaren this year could reshape the entire championship picture. Piastri has never publicly attacked McLaren over what happened in 2025. Instead, he has defended the team's intentions. "For me, the intentions were always in the right place," he said. "We'll do a review. Do we want to do things exactly the same? Do we want to change things a bit? We'll get a handle on that fully before we go racing again." But diplomacy does not erase reality. At Monza, Norris lost time in the pits and emerged behind Piastri, only for McLaren to instruct a position swap. Damon Hill later said, "Wow, that's quite a big thing to do, isn't it? To give points away to a guy you could be fighting for the World Championship." Then came Qatar, where a late safety car appeared and McLaren were the only team not to pit either car. Hill called it the point where Piastri probably felt the worst he was going to feel, adding, "I think he could not believe what had happened there." Those two moments alone arguably reshaped the title fight. Norris went on to clinch the championship by 2 points over Max Verstappen, while Piastri finished third, 13 points behind his teammate, having led the standings for much of the year. Hill's conclusion was blunt. "He's lost out because of some decisions with McLaren trying to be fair," he said. "Next year, if I were him, I'd be coming back saying, 'Listen, I love the team and it's been great, but I have to think of myself.'" That advice reflects a familiar truth in elite motorsport. Fairness inside the garage often collapses under championship pressure, especially when two drivers are evenly matched. Yet Piastri's own response has not been confrontational. Asked whether Norris's championship would change their relationship, he said, "He's still Lando Norris. It's not like he's become Superman. I'm expecting full fairness from the team and equality going forward. I don't have any concerns that will change at all." He has also stressed that McLaren's internal discussions are a smaller deal than what it gets made out to be, and that the team's approach is constantly evolving. But equality in principle does not guarantee equality in outcome. In 2025, McLaren's structure allowed it to manage the Norris-Piastri rivalry because the car was stable and predictable. That stability made it possible to prioritize harmony over maximization. The 2026 regulations remove that safety net. The overhaul to power units, aerodynamics and energy deployment will make early season performance volatile. Piastri acknowledged this directly. "It's going to be unpredictable and uncertain," he said. "The way we race each other is going to be quite different." He also pointed to battery management becoming central to racecraft, opening up strategic divergence where some drivers attack while others conserve. That divergence weakens the pit wall's ability to impose clean internal outcomes. In a season like that, sacrificing points for internal balance is no longer a sustainable option. If one driver has the upper hand on a given weekend, restraining them risks losing to rival teams. And McLaren's rivals, Mercedes, Red Bull and Ferrari, are all entering 2026 under different pressures, with no guarantee that McLaren will begin the new era in clear control. Andrea Stella has spoken optimistically about McLaren's technical group, calling it one of the strongest technical departments that I could have been part of in my career, and pointing to the working standards that drove the team's turnaround from early 2023 to championship winners in 2024 and 2025. But even Stella has acknowledged that the new regulations make the competitive order impossible to predict. For Piastri, unpredictability is not a threat, it is leverage. In 2025, McLaren's stability allowed the papaya rules to function. Piastri defended them at the time. At the end of the day, they gave us both as good a chance as the team could have to fairly fight for a world championship, he said. That's all you can ask for. But the outcome was a season where momentum shifts caused by team decisions ultimately favoured Norris. That experience appears to have sharpened Piastri's outlook. Reflecting on 2025, he said, "Obviously, there were a few moments I'd rather have again, or rather not have, but on the whole, I'm very proud of what I was able to achieve." He added, "I know what I want a bit more now." It is a subtle line, but revealing. It suggests clarity born from frustration rather than disappointment, a recalibration of expectations rather than a loss of confidence. Former Alpine Executive Director Marcin Budkowski has suggested that Piastri could eventually look elsewhere if McLaren's internal dynamics or competitiveness falter. "I think the Oscar camp is less happy than the Lando camp," he said. "If there's either a lack of competitiveness on McLaren's side or more in-team fighting between Oscar and Lando, then I can see Oscar looking elsewhere." Budkowski added that Mark Webber, Piastri's manager, would naturally be exploring future options, noting that's his job. Although Piastri is contracted to McLaren until at least the end of 2028, those comments underline how pivotal 2026 could become. It is not just a technical reset, but a strategic checkpoint. For a driver who has already demonstrated championship-leading pace, the next step is not validation, but conversion. That context sharpens the importance of the season opener in Australia. Norris begins his title defence in Melbourne, where he won the previous year, but Piastri was arguably quicker until a spin in tricky conditions cost him victory. Piastri has finished every Australian Grand Prix he has raced in inside the points, and a strong start at his home race would instantly challenge the internal hierarchy. The comparison to Valtteri Bottas's dominant 2019 season opener against Lewis Hamilton has already been made by commentators, not because it predicts the outcome, but because it highlights how quickly perception can shift at the start of a new era. In reset seasons, reputations are fluid and authority is provisional. Piastri himself has framed early 2026 as particularly volatile. "Especially at the beginning of the season, you could see some interesting scenarios," he said. That volatility also weakens the logic of preemptive team orders. When outcomes are uncertain, teams tend to avoid imposing hierarchy and allow races to play out organically. That is precisely the freedom Piastri lacked in parts of 2025. Damon Hill believes that experience should change how Piastri approaches such moments. "He will probably look at that and go, 'Well, maybe I won't do that again,'" Hill said, referring to the Monza position swap. "Next year, if I were him, I'd be coming back saying, 'Listen, I love the team and it's been great, but I have to think of myself.'" Hill's broader argument was clear. He's lost out because of some decisions with McLaren trying to be fair. Piastri has not echoed that rhetoric publicly, but he may not need to. The 2026 framework itself limits the team's ability to repeat those decisions without consequence. When performance margins are volatile, political compromise becomes strategically expensive. Technically, McLaren's early pivot towards the 2026 project, which allowed rivals to close the gap late in 2025, could prove decisive. Piastri has expressed confidence that McLaren will remain competitive regardless of the regulations set, and he enters the season not as a junior partner, but as a proven contender who led a championship and finished with multiple race wins. That changes how his performance will be interpreted internally. In 2025, Norris entered as McLaren's benchmark and exited as champion. In 2026, Piastri enters as a driver who has already shown he can outperform Norris across sustained phases of a season when momentum aligns. That recalibrates the internal power balance before a wheel even turns. Yet Piastri continues to frame the rivalry constructively. "Sometimes that's been uncomfortable for everyone," he said of fighting Norris. "But ultimately, yeah, it's been a good thing." He has stressed that pushing each other has made both drivers better and that McLaren's success in both championships demonstrates the effectiveness of their approach. But even within that framing, there is recognition that the system must evolve. The subtext of Piastri's response to 2026, then, is not rebellion but alignment. He's not asking McLaren to change its philosophy. He's recognizing that the environment itself no longer supports the structures that constrained him. Instead of challenging policy, he benefits from physics. In practical terms, that means fewer situations where McLaren can justify sacrificing his race for internal balance. It means early season weekends where strategy divergence creates openings that cannot be closed through pit wall instruction without real cost. And it means that if Piastri starts strongly, momentum becomes harder to contain. Not because Norris weakens, but because volatility weakens control. This is not a redemption narrative, nor is it a revolt. It is a structural opportunity. Piastri does not enter 2026 hoping for conditions to favour him. He enters believing that the conditions already do. Whether that belief converts into a championship depends on countless variables: car performance, execution, reliability, rivals. But one thing is already different. The mechanisms that shaped the outcome of 2025 are no longer fit for purpose in the new era. As Hill put it, fairness cost Piastri points. In 2026, fairness applied in the same way may cost McLaren titles. So, when the old systems stop working, who adapts faster, the reigning champion Norris or the challenger who believes the rules finally favour him?